Ladies and gentlemen, silence. The court is in session. In the court of Honorable Judge Ms. Maruk Barucha, today you will witness the public trial of Mr. Willam Shakespeare, the dramatist. I summon Mr. Willam Shakespeare into the court. Mr. Shakespeare, please come in and take your seat in the box for the accused. The Honorable Judge, Ms. Maruk Barucha, is entering the court.
Mr. Willam Shakespeare. Mr. Willam Shakespeare, I have received a number of complaints against you from several people and associations from around the world, and the detailed charge sheet was issued to you a few days ago, so you're aware of them in advance. How do you plead, guilty or not guilty?
Madam, when I received your summons short while ago, I felt like I was hit by a bolt out of the blue. In my times, it was customary that everyone wrote their epitaphs. And I had said in my epitaph that cursed be the man who moves my bones. And then I received, after 400 years almost, this kind of a notice that I have to present myself in your court. And therefore, I confidently plead not guilty to all the charges.
Well, in that case, we'll have to see what the prosecution has to say. Is the prosecution ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please call the plaintiffs one by one.
Yes, Your Honor. The first plaintiff to appear in this court is George Bernard Shaw, dramatist and critic.
Mr. Shaw, Mr. George Bernard Shaw, I presume.
Yes, ma'am.
Will you please introduce yourself, because some of us are not quite sure who you are, and then make your own case, please. Thank you.
Your Honor, it's so unfortunate that I have to introduce myself to the whole world. Everybody seems to have been talking about someone called Shakespeare. I have not much heard of him. But anyway, whatever I have heard about him, I'd like to make my presentation. I have prepared it properly for your benefit and for the benefit of a certain man called Shakespeare. No one seems to be knowing me actually. Me, Bernard Shaw, George Bernard Shaw. And it's unfortunate that I have to sit on the shelves of the libraries along with this man for centuries together now. I have striven very hard to open the eyes of my countrymen, the Englishmen, to the hollowness, to the emptiness, to also the barbarousness, and also the snobbery, not to speak of the robbery on his part, that this gentleman has been committing for a long time. There is not an idea worth a penny.
Wadin, my good friend.
What's it? Oh, it's stupid. 2 pence. It's stupid. Not a penny. Sorry for that. Usually I keep hair currency in my pocket. On the other hand, see my plays. You will know immediately the difference between what he has written and what I have written. A Iberian and God to a satyr, a goat only. I am a man of ideas, a philosopher, and I give better ideas for men, women also, to live in a happy way. See some of my plays, Mrs. Warren's profession. She is a prostitute.
Come on. This was a woman of comfort.
Woman of comfort. To my knowledge, no woman ever makes man's life comfortable. Anyway,
Mr. Shaw, you will be held in contempt.
I'm sorry, ma'am. I apologize to you. I apologize to you. But a comfort woman or whatever. If the comfort women were not in the society, our young people moving and running amok like bulls and goats, we would not have been in a position to control them at all. Look at another play which I have written, Arms and a Man. Well, I am a realist. I am an anti-romantic person. And therefore I speak the truth only about the soldier. Like all of us do, ma'am. Soldiers also like butter and chocolates better than bullets and guns. My ladyship, I have also written a play called Candida. I have known that the new woman in our times, in modern times, is mature and enlightened enough to make the right choices, especially choices of their husbands. Now look at his plays. Got some of them here. Look at his plays. All borrowed ideas. Bungled up, broken, twisted, and sometimes plagiarized also. Kidnapped and stolen everything from others. In short, what I want to point out is his accents of originality and my presence of originality. I repeat that I am a man of ideas. I am a philosopher, trying to better the minds and ways of men and women also. What is this unlettered Shakespeare? Little Latin and less Greek? Just a pampered, puffed up poacher and blooming liar, a sentimental entertainer, a boorish jester, good for an afternoon only. I am forever for all the times, because I give ideas. Read me. Reject him. Remember, forget him. Open me. Pick me up. And drop him down. That's all, man. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. In his defense, I have to allow William Shakespeare to counter whatever you've said and defend himself. Yes, please do.
I knew that praise did not come to Mr. Shaw easy. But I did not know that even criticism could come to him in such a hard way. And then my heroes, at least the tragic heroes, they have been characterized by certain qualities. There is stupidity, and I find in Mr. Shaw's deposition a combination of both. Mr. Shaw's deposition here was not a charge against me, but a proclamation. And I believe that the proclamation has come out of a strong sting of the green-eyed monster. My readers will know who is the green-eyed monster. It is jealousy. In my humble way, I wrote 36 plays. Mr. Shaw wanted to outdo me, he wrote 52. But even he did not remember the names of more than 3 plays from his 52. Secondly, so far as public memory goes, and this is what probably is eating Mr. Shaw so much, that Shakespeare has survived for 400 years. Mr. Shaw himself is on the verge of extinction because of arrogance, stupidity, which is in modern terms called narcissism. Legend goes that the narcissism of Mr. Shaw once went out of bounds. He took a naked photograph of himself and sent it to his friends. I wonder whether they remained his friends afterwards or not.
Well, in the Greek, there was a tradition of nakedness, sir.
Nakedness has to have an art. Nakedness out of arrogance, ego, in spite of, I don't know how you look, but in spite of that, that kind of nudity is not artistic. But let us look at the facts. When I was preparing my defense, I knew Mr. Shaw would be coming very hard at me. I checked the dictionary of quotations. William Shakespeare has got 30 pages in that book. Highest number of pages. Mr. Shaw has got 2 pages. After William Shakespeare, you get the Holy Bible, which has got 22 pages. So even if, as Mr. Shaw claimed, he were God, he would come only after me. And then, only because alphabetically he comes before me. He can't just embrace Godhood like that. Mr. Shaw is an example of what I said as some thrust themselves upon greatness. I've said that some are born great, some achieve greatness. Greatness is thrust upon some. But there is a 4th category, madam, who thrust themselves upon greatness. And it is for you to judge. It is for you to judge, and the playgoers and the august audience we have got here, for them to judge what kind of mindset Mr. Shaw is having. You see, we both belong to the heavens now, but I keep avoiding him all the time. And it is under duress of this court that he has finally found an occasion to hit back at me. But that apart, I will read out to you what Mr. Shaw, when he was a better self, has said about me. And that should answer all the charges he has flung against me. Mr. Shaw says, but I am bound to add that I pity the man who cannot enjoy Shakespeare. He has outlasted thousands of abler thinkers. Now he is a philosopher, but I have outlasted thousands of abler thinkers and will outlast after him 1,000 more. his gift of telling a story. Now he has another job here at me, provided someone else told it to him first. I accept that. His enormous power over language, as conspicuous again a jibe in his senseless and silly abuse of it, as in his miracles of expression, his humor, his sense of idiosyncratic character. Had Mr. Shaw lived with me, I would certainly have written a tragicomedy on Mr. Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare.
One moment.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare.
Okay. Will you please allow me to continue this? His prodigious fund of the vital energy, which is, it seems, the true differentiating property behind the faculties good, bad, or indifferent of the man of genius. Now, George, what happened to you? You want to disown your own writing?
Order. Please address the court.
Okay. Madam, please ask what
If you
happened to George.
Well, you can ask him later when you return
Okay.
to your graves. Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I hope you've been suitably answered. Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. And we'll wait for the next accusation. The next accusation is made by the President of the Dramatists Association.
I summon the President of the Dramatists Association.
Yes, please do. Will you please read out your charges or speak about them?
I shall read them out. I represent the association which stands for professional engineering, like the accountants or architects and engineers. And I start with a doubt about Shakespeare's the claim that he has written 36 plays. How can anyone write 36 plays in
Sir,
18 years?
excuse me, please switch on your mic.
How can anyone write 36 plays in 18 years? 2 plays a year, plus act in them and collaborate with other playwrights, and write 2 long poems, plus 150 odd sonnets. You were also a park owner of Globe Theatre and made enough money to buy the second best house in Stratford-on-Avon, plus a coat of arms for your father. Were you a cultural labor contractor rather than a dramatist?
Say, I could write 36 plays in 18 years because there was no association of dramatists at my time. This has been my lot for the last 300 years. That only the people who are not in the theatre, but by forming such associations and bodies, they sort of try to become the monitors of theatre. They have raised all sorts of questions about me. And actually this charge was answered when I read out Mr. Shaw. Mr. Shaw said, I had a prodigious fund of vital energy. Unfortunately, office bearers and members of the dramatist associations lack that kind of prodigious fund. So they all put together, they cannot command the energy I had. But let me share a secret. All the plays, that is to say every line and word of every play, I don't remember having written it myself. You see, in my times, there was no such thing as a separation of roles. I have said in one of my plays that the world is a stage where each man has to play his part, and sometimes a man will play more than one part. So far as this business of writing plays or producing plays or presenting plays was concerned, I had a 4-pronged role. I was a playwright, W-R-I-G-H-T, in the sense that plays have to be made, plays have to be wrought, otherwise they will rot. Secondly, I was also an actor. So I knew what to write and how to present it. Like one of my favorite, not my favorite, but people's favorite characters, Hamlet says, suit the action to the word and word to the action. Thirdly, I was also the company manager. And fourthly, I had a stake. I was a partner in the company. So owner, manager, actor and writer. 4 plays I had performed. And in my days, the normal run of a play used to be at least, at the most, 2 weeks, not more than that. And London had a population of 140,000 Englishmen and another 40,000 from outside, all over Europe, mainly parts of Africa and distant parts of Asia, used to be in London all the time. They wanted a new play. I really failed to understand that I also keep meeting Dame Agatha Christie. One of her plays, the title of which comes from one of my plays, The Mousetrap, from Hamlet. Agatha Christie has a play of that name, and that has been running for years together in some place in London for almost unstoppably for about 25-30 years. This kind of a situation was not there. People were very keen to have new plays, and therefore a playwright, I don't say a dramatist, I am saying a playwright, could not sit idle. And therefore I collaborated with my colleagues, the Lord Chamberlain's men and later on the King's men. Both were like a family. We used to sit together, and then different people would write different scenes, and then it was my job as a writer, as an actor, as a manager and as a stakeholder in the company to put the play together. And therefore theatre was a collective kind of activity, and it was possible. And secondly, I would again go back to what Mr. Shaw said. I did not have to invent the plot. Out of 36 plays under my name, 35 were either they existed as plays or books or poems, and therefore I had to reinvent. And that also made my job easier. Now that reinvention was not easy. That came with a lot of trouble, with a lot of pangs, with a lot of choices, sometimes contradictory choices. But it was not that difficult with the help of some comedians, some small actors, some medium level actors, some actors like Burbage, who could play the heroic roles to perfection, to put together the already known plots into works of dramatic poetry.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. President, sir, of the Dramatists Association. I think you've been suitably answered. All right. However, Mr. Shakespeare, I do request you to display some economy in your replies, for the simple reason that this is not the Victorian court, this is my court, and we do live in a jet age now. Charge 2.
All the defense William Shakespeare has given, all the defense that William Shakespeare has given, he could have given it long back, 400 years ago, when Green and others accused you of borrowing their feathers. They call you crow, borrowing their feathers. You kept silent, and your mysterious silence continues for 4 centuries. And in addition to that, as you yourself had admitted, you have said in your epitaph, "Cursed be he who moves my boats." So all that has created such a controversy. People have questioned your authorship, and they have said that probably Bacon wrote your plays, or Queen Elizabeth herself wrote your plays. So had you avoided that, writing on your epitaph, your CP who mows my books. All the
President,
controversy would have been.
yes, but considering that there has not been any kind of summoning like this in the past, it would be difficult for the gentleman to have a say in the matter. This has perhaps been the first such trial. So I think it kind of answers its own question, doesn't it?
So I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
But madam, I would like to make a
Well,
couple
we'll
of
wait for the
observations.
president of the Theatre Lovers Association and then you can.
No, regarding what the President of
Right,
Dramatists Association
but we'll
has
give you a
said.
minute.
Yeah. One is Queen Elizabeth had better things to do than write plays, and she did not have the time. Secondly, I did not answer Green's charges. I would correct you there. He has not called me just a crow, but an upstart crow. So I know the charge very well. But when he made that charge, Green was already established in theatre and I was a beginner. And therefore, I felt that whatever Green said, I would focus on writing new plays, creating new plays, and after a period of time, Green's charges would be answered by people who came to my place.
Thank you. Mr. Bailiff, who comes in next?
I summon the president of the Theatre Lovers Association.
I'm the president of Theatre Lovers Association, and I have one charge to be read out against William Shakespeare. Why are only aristocratic characters given a central place in serious drama? When beggars die, no comets are seen. Heaven themselves portend the death of monarchs. Poor naked wretches are acknowledged in the speeches of Mad Lear. Hamlet talks slightingly of Horatio even while asking his favor. Mr. Shakespeare did not care for the common man. Thank you, my lord.
Now this is a very tricky kind of question. You see, I lived in a certain era, a certain age, where democracy was there as a system, but still my society did not have this spirit of democracy. The history of England as a nation which would dominate world politics for another 200-300 years, that nation itself was in the making. And it was the monarchy and the aristocracy who were making that nation mainly. And therefore, material for great personalities naturally came from these two classes. But that doesn't mean I wrote only about them or only for them. One more thing was, some plays would be performed publicly in the Globe or Rose or Swan or other theatres where all classes of society would be present. But sometimes some plays had to be performed in the castles and mansions of the aristocracy, and therefore aristocracy had to have an adequate representation. But I don't think that I didn't focus my attention only on the kings and their nobles and lords and dukes and ladies and so on. Whereas my most popular character is Falstaff, and he calls himself Sir John Falstaff. But he himself has confessed that he wasn't knighted kind of by fair means. Falstaff is a rogue. Falstaff is a liar. Falstaff is a debaucherous, is a debauched. Falstaff is always in debt and never thinks of repaying it. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow from Macbeth really could apply to Falstaff also. But Falstaff has a noble heart, and therefore some historians have said that my most popular character, Sir John Falstaff, in spite of not coming from the royalty or the aristocracy, has got more admirers. And then you will find actually these critics, they speak, from both sides. Sometimes I'm accused of bringing in common people without purpose and bringing in their humor without purpose. And because common people humor in my days bordered on vulgarity, bordered on obscenities, I am charged with that also. So I think this charge itself is based on insufficient reading of my plays and all my histories, all my comedies. Now look at the fool in my play King Lear. Look at the two gravediggers in my play Hamlet. Look at the porter who is famous for his seal in Macbeth. Look at the gossips in Othello. And look at the street fighters in Romeo and Juliet. You will find they are all common people. And therefore the chorus at the end of Romeo and Juliet rightly says that this tragedy has punished all people, not just Romeo and Juliet and their families.
President of the Theatre Lovers Association, are you satisfied?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Shakespeare. Mr. Bailiff?
I now summon the President of World Feminist Forum.
Good evening to you. Well, I would like to read out the charges. Men are the central characters in tragedies and histories. Women figure only in comedies. Cleopatra has to share the privilege with Antony, and Lady Macbeth fades into a neurotic somnambulist. Why can't she stand behind Macbeth in his hour of greatest need? Tragic hero never collapses like his spouse. Even Cleopatra is a shadow of the original self. Several nasty remarks against women, such as frailty, thy name is woman. Why this prejudice against women? Mr. Shakespeare, you better answer this very carefully. You're sitting in the court of a lady.
Again, my society did not have a feminist association. We had association with feminists, but not a feminist association. And then I would say that there are powerful women in my plays. But sometimes the unwomanly women, they are more remembered, like Lady Macbeth. But look at Cordelia in King Lear. Look at Miranda in Tempest. They are such refined, and again feminists will pardon me because this jargon is new to me, I am not familiar with it. But they are refined, they are women in essence of the term as I understood it in my days. Now the other women, especially Lady Macbeth, I don't think she herself calls something more than a woman. She says herself that unsex me. And there I find that there is an entirely different kind of woman. But if you come back to Desdemona, again you will find she is a woman in every sense of the term as we understood. Cleopatra is a rather peculiar case. Basically because all the details about Cleopatra known to the feminists of the 19th and 20th centuries were not known to me. The history I read was not exactly properly documented research kind of history. But even in Antony and Cleopatra, I have tried to give full justice to Cleopatra, basically because Cleopatra was a very powerful woman with a role in history. I would only accept this charge in the case of Cressida, in Troilus and Cressida, where the humiliation of Cressida is so intense that sometimes I feel or I wish I could have written the play in a different way. One more thing, I was writing my plays, most of my plays, in the shadow of a very great woman, the Queen Elizabeth. And she had declared that she was a woman in the business of men. And she had an overwhelming presence. And therefore, I had to take great care when I portrayed my women characters. Because the queen had such keen eyes everywhere. For example, it was just a coincidence that my play Richard II was performed on the eve of the rebellion of the Lord of Essex. But still, I received signals from the Queen that this won't do. The Queen sent me a message that you want to suggest that I am Richard II. And like Richard II was overthrown by treachery and treason, I also am going to be overthrown. It is only after, God rest her soul in peace, but it is only after the death of the great queen, she was a great queen no doubt, that I started depicting more powerful women. And therefore you have the Valusia, the mother of Coriolanus, then you have Miranda, you have Lady Macbeth, you have a lady like Desdemona. It was possible only after we had a king who was not much interested in women, and then he was an easygoing person, and therefore there was no tension because he was my patron. So I enjoyed greater freedom with my, not with my women, but women characters after the demise of Queen Elizabeth.
Thank you. Does that satisfactorily answer your charges? Sure. Thank you.
I now summon Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, a creation of the accused.
Madam Justice, I'm Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. I have accusations against my own creator. I stand here with conviction lest I stand convicted in your leadership's eye, as failed to fix to be or not to be, and thus be damned in letters permanently. Should I list how quick I think and execute, I shall be charged that I put fetters in justice's foot. So brevity being the soul of wit, to be brief, I list to announce my innocence instances chief, to prove that I decide far faster than 40,000 justices in 40 courts can. For don't we see, my lord, cases pending for decades and lawyers arguing unending. But critics and the bard of Stratford of Avon think of all princes. Hamlet procrastinates alone. To be or not to be, that is the question. He made me a student of philosophy. He made me a student of Martin Luther's University, Wittenberg. But unkindest cut of all, he let me think too much, talk too much. Result? I am the icon of delay and procrastination. Nobody remembers me for my philosophy or poetry. Freud says I have Oedipus complex, and the feminists are tearing me apart because I rejected Ophelia. It is a fate worse than death. It is a fate worse than death. And it's all because of this bard. It's all because of this bard. I seek justice in the court of law, madam. I seek justice. Justice.
Mr. Shakespeare, let's hope that your response is a little less wordy and a little less delayed than the accusation itself.
Madam, I would plead that you observe this restriction on the accusers also.
Yes.
The Hamlet is supposed to be...
We just had to let him finish.
Yeah. Have you
Mr.
finished?
Bailiff, if you could explain to all the accusers that they could keep it a little short and sweet. Poor Mr. Shakespeare looks tired and seems to be missing his grave.
No, I stopped my turning in my grave long back. You see, this has been a temptation onwards the 18th century. I went through 3 phases. First, I was on the stage. Then they put me on the page. That is to say, my plays were available in printed form. And then from stage to page, they took me in their mind. You see, the play is not Hamlet, though popularly it is quoted as Hamlet. The play is the tragedy of Hamlet, Prince of Denmark. I have been criticized because that play is very long. And yes, it is a long play, but you have to look at the whole title, the complete title. Denmark is as important to that play as Hamlet is. And Hamlet, I did not force procrastination on him. Hamlet was never able to gather his wits, though he pretended madness. Hamlet was absolutely shaken to the foundation of his persona when he came to know through the ghost that his father has been killed by his own uncle and by his own mother. Not directly, but indirectly. Hamlet feels that she also knew of the plot. And therefore procrastination doesn't have to be forced on such a person. It becomes his natural reaction. The tragedy of Hamlet is basically the tragedy of a person whose moral sense is badly shaken. And people tried to correct this. In the 18th century, people like David Garrick tried to correct the mistakes I had made. People like Alexander Pope went editing my plays and they changed some plays. For example, in King Lear, what they did was, they thought King Lear was too violent a tragedy and therefore the end was changed and Edgar marries Cordelia and they lived happily ever after. The point is, when the state is so rotten, nobody can live happily ever after. And had Hamlet not been so uncertain about what to do, to be or not to be, has been celebrated as the greatest statement of a philosophical mind. And he is a man who is surrounded by conspiracy, surrounded by pomp, surrounded by treachery, surrounded by vulgarity, surrounded by cutthroat competition, surrounded by blatant, naked power. And in such a situation, it is difficult to make up one's own mind. And Hamlet represents the confusion of a noble person. My boy, that is why people have remembered you for 400 years. Had I made you a dashing young hero, then people would have probably forgotten you. Say in 10 or 20 years, when another character came to the fore.
Well, Hamlet, does that answer your question?
Yes,
It certainly sounds like if you had lived today, you would have been the Prince of New Delhi. Thank you.
Another character created by the accused has grievances against him. So I summon Othello, the Moor of Venice.
Respected Judge, I beg to level some charges against my creator, Mr. William Shakespeare. All the fans of Shakespeare think that this Willie Bard is unquestionable. But I am going to level some serious charges against him. He has damned my character for eternity. You, sir, no doubt you gave me a noble status and a respect of my fellow citizens. Most importantly, you gave me the love of a pure woman, my wife Desdemona. And then you turned the tables on me so adroitly, so convincingly that to date I am the symbol of jealousy and suspicion. How could you make me such a fool that I could blindly be led by Iago? Not even once did you make me investigate the truth for myself. You made me take judgment in my own hands and kill my own sweet and innocent Desdemona. And then, like a coward, you made me take my own life. This is perverse imagination. I am convinced that you have been biased in my portrayal. And is this why you have reduced me to a mere entertainer for the audience, especially the white audience? Honorable Judge, I have full faith in the power of law. I have a firm belief that everybody is equal before law. Law doesn't discriminate between Moor and a European. I, Othello, stand here for justice. Justice, my lord, justice.
I was not unfair to Othello. The people of Venice were. Mr. Othello, again, you guys don't read my plays titles. I have called Othello the noble Moor. I have not questioned your nobility, your bravery. And some critics have said, that is what I hear, that Othello is one of my most poetic plays, poetic imagination. My own is most at work in Othello. And actually your stories of your adventures, the very strange lands you had visited, very strange creatures you had seen. You yourself say in the play that Desdemona was more fascinated by that. So probably the right thing would have been to keep telling stories to Desdemona and not to marry her. But you married her. Basically because probably you had a point to prove that by the virtue of my bravery, courage, my success, my military genius and my adventurous life, I can make an entry into the heart of the European society. One of my contemporaries has said that the Londoners would give nothing to a lame beggar, the white lame beggar, but they would give 10 times as much to see a dead Indian. there was such anger against the invasion of the white European society by the Moors from Africa, Jews from Israel, that your life was going to end in a tragedy. Had you restrained yourself, but restraint was never your strong point. Like clarity was never Hamlet's strong point. Like logic was never Macbeth's strong point. And therefore, you lost your restraint. And then you made an irresistible kind of offer to Desdemona. And then you are surrounded by the pure and stupid Desdemona on the one hand, and the totally rotten but very intelligent Iago on the other hand, and you allowed yourself to be influenced by both. That is where my noble mood, your tragedy lies. Otherwise, I wanted you to stay in noble mood all along. Now, how does this happen? I will tell you, Madam Chief Justice, my accuser and my audience, that sometimes plays go out of hands. All my so-called great tragedies, at some extent, have gone out of my hands. And I would like to remind all of you that in my only original play, but that also has its own sources, The Midsummer Night's Dream, I have said that there are three kinds of persons: the poet, the lover, and the lunatic, who live in the world of imagination, in the world of fancy. My exact words are, the poet, the lunatic, and the poet, the lover, and the lunatic are of imagination compact. They created out of imagination. And sometimes they go out of hands. And therefore, once the character is taken over, not by me, but it becomes a living thing, a living mind with all its positives and negatives, then it goes out of my hands. And that is how you went out of my hands. I tried to pull you back. You should have realized this was not for me, that it was silly to kill one's own beloved wife just because her handkerchief. See, ladies have so many handkerchiefs. Just because her handkerchief was found in a suspect place. But having said that, I must say that my feeling for you has always been of great warmth.
I hope you're feeling duly loved now. And your accusations have been answered. Thank you.
The last plaintiff in today's trial is Count Leo Tolstoy, the well-known Russian novelist. I summon him.
Your Honor, the accused just mentioned that characters go out of your hand. I think that's a rationalization. It is a rather euphemism for saying that you could not manage the tragedy that you were writing. You yourself left that form, and it is said that in the last phase you wrote tragicomedy, romance plays, romantic plays. The romances as they are called, and they are, to my mind, more significant than your tragedy, because the characters don't run out of your hand. And critics from Dr. Johnson to me had taken you to task for the moral bankruptcy of your plays. There is no poetic justice in your plays. Virtue is not rewarded and crime is not punished. Actually, often it is virtue that is punished. We talked about Cordelia, but I am still not convinced why she should hang in the end. Dr. Johnson said that he could not see your play through. He had to leave the theatre. He could not stand the hanging of Cordelia. So why such cruelty to people who are virtuous and whose virtue is proved beyond doubt? So, and then you match odd couples. Husbands often do not deserve the wife. Portia, for example, is too good for Bessani. Desdemona wastes her life on the moon. Leontis is a base Indian, throwing away a pearl in Hermione, richer than all his tribe. So I wish that you had written more plays like the tragicomedy, because it's often the tragicomedy that goes near the epic and it tells the whole truth rather than the tragedy. So my charge on you is that you are morally confused and you rationalize that inability by saying that your characters run out of time.
Mr. Shakespeare, please answer very carefully because most wives do think they're too good for their husbands. And there are
And
lots
vice
of wives
versa,
seated
madam.
here.
It was the other way around also. And I don't know how many such very good pairs of couples Mr. Tolstoy has got in his own novels. For his novels also have very tragic characters of women. Anna Karenina, for example, I haven't read it. Madam Chief Justice, I balk at the size of his books. I think that is where the answer to his charge lies. Mr. Tolstoy has no experience in writing plays, and I have no experience in writing in the genre he wrote. In my time, there was hardly any prose. In Tolstoy's time, prose and poetry were separate. Poetry was the land of imagination. Prose was the land of clarity. Poetry was supposed to be passionate. Prose was supposed to be objective and controlled. And therefore dramatic poetry was supposed to present action. And prose was supposed to discuss action, analyze action. We have different mindsets. And then a play which is to be performed on the can go on writing about a certain character for 10 pages or more, like Mr. Tolstoy has done. And then the reader has the choice of skipping those pages and following the action. The playwright does not have that kind of an option. The playwright has to take immense care that the play stays alive. There you can't leave gaps. Because the same critics have been objecting to my long speeches of my characters in my history plays, and they criticize me for having no action there. And now Mr. Tolstoy is criticizing me for having too much action. But a play is a living thing. And when I said that characters go out of my hands, it was not in defense as such. Basically, I was pointing to the creative process of how a play is created. And I believe that a play needs, as I said, some love. A play needs lot of poetry, but you cannot write a good play unless there is some madness in that play. And in my days, this kind of madness was allowed, was expected. Explain the actions. It is from 18th century onwards when these self-appointed guardians of morality, of mankind, they started developing the habit of sitting on judgment on everyone and everything under the sun. And the tradition starts from Dryden, it comes to Johnson, then it comes to Mr. Pope. Then the Romantics gave me some justice. But they took me into their minds and they forgot the action of my plays on the stage. Now this idea that having a morality and having poetic justice did not exist in my time. The age was so ruthless. To play like Winter's Tale, you need to have tried all the other forms of writing earlier. And therefore, I tried comedy first, then I turned to history, then I tried tragical history, then I tried comical history in the sense that it was not a humorous play, but the action ended with a positive kind of ending. Then I wrote the big tragedies. I wouldn't call them great tragedies, but the big tragedies. And then I realized that there is very little line of separation between the tragic and comic. When Polonius said tragical, comical, comical, tragical, I was not serious about it. But after measure for measure, I realized that one false step, one wrong word, one wrong gesture could change the whole thing from a comedy to tragedy, or if the virtuous character showed that kind of resilience, it could pull it back from tragedy to comedy.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. Mr. Tolstoy, are you satisfied with the response? Sort of. Well, maybe you should thrash it out back in heaven, or wherever else you are.
Madam Chief Justice, would you allow me to last few words in my defense?
Few.
I am not known for brevity, but I will do my best. Madam, I did not know that I would be the world's greatest writer, and I would be remembered for 400 years. Madam, I had no education, very little education. I went to the Stratford Grammar School, but I found it so dull that my mind was not there. I came from a very humble family and a rather irresponsible father with 7 kids, and therefore I started spending more time outside, where I met this stout buxom girl, Anne Hathaway, 8 years senior to me and more experienced in matters of life. And then I fell for her and I married her, and our first child was delivered 7 months after our wedding. So I kept learning from my actions and my mistakes. We had 3 children in the first 3 years of marriage, 1 daughter Susanna, then 2 twins. And then I realized that this life was not for me. Fortunately, my wife encouraged me to go and try my hand at writing poetry, writing plays. So 7 years I spent away from my family. Most of my critics and enemies have got big fantasies, big fantasies about those 7 years. But I spent them well. I educated myself by staying in London, going to various parts of London. London was the greatest trading center, economic center of the Europe. And then I spent my time with all the sections of society. There were ships in London, so I got to know people from other parts of the world who came sailing to London. And by say, I turned the age of 25. I had enough material to last me for the 18 years, which finally yielded 36th place. I had no time to think. I had no time to read my plays again. I had no time to correct them. I had no time to modify them. I had no time even to publish them. When I was alive, only my sonnets were published and the 2 long poems were published in my own lifetime. But I had this tremendous fund of vital energy which kept me going. And I only appeal to my readers, though I still believe that my plays are not meant for reading, they are to be performed. But my readers as well as the actors, that I try to create, if you put together all the characters of my plays, you get a nice Shakespearean village of 1,000 people. There are something like 940 characters in my 36 plays. Come to this Shakespeare land, come to this world. And what is happening there? Under the greenwood tree, who loves to lie with me? I am inviting you there. This song from my play, as you like it. And the song goes like this: who does ambition shun and loves to lie in the sun, seeking the food he eats and pleased with what he gets. Come hither, come hither, come hither. So this is my humble invitation to all who are interested in theatre, who are interested in Shakespeare, who are interested in life. Come to the Shakespeare country.
Thank you, Mr. Shakespeare. I would like now to pronounce my judgment, and before I do, I would like all the accusers to please come up and share the stage with me. For over an hour now, we have heard accusations filed at William Shakespeare. Mr. Shakespeare, I was told that in 1964, when the rest of the world was celebrating your 4th century, students at the Edinburgh University decided to carry out a mock funeral procession for you, with your name written on a coffin saying 400 years is a long time, now let's finally really bury him. But in response to that, I ask, why is Hollywood still making Shakespeare movies? Why is Bollywood still adapting Shakespeare's plays? Why is he still on covers of Time magazine? Why is he all over cyberspace, in our Facebook, Google+? Why is he in management books? Why are spiritual teachers turning to Shakespeare for great truths uttered and powerful terms coined? To those who wish to do away with Shakespeare, I can only say your negativity and prejudice cannot just wish him away. He is here to stay, he exists, and I think he will continue to exist. He may have put old wine in new bottles, but what a bottle. Earlier today, an eminent speaker I heard talk said that inclusiveness in education was a very key aspect of education today. Well, Shakespeare took one of the first steps towards inclusiveness. English wasn't the royal court language. It was more Latin, and the clergy and the nobility enjoyed that. Shakespeare brought English from down to up. The common man's language became the court language, and he made it happen. He was an astute actor and a shrewd businessman, and besides being extraordinarily creative, he was a commercial success. His stories, though plagiarized, predated copyright laws. So that accusation just does not hold. I agree when he says that Shakespeare was never intended to be read and analyzed. Rather, his works need to be played, heard, and enjoyed. I am bound by all laws of literary and rational matters to pronounce these accusations as frivolous, irrelevant, and immaterial. I am constrained to borrow his own words to sum it all up. Age cannot wither, nor custom stale his infinite variety. All in all, Mr. Shakespeare, you are not for an age, but for all times. This court restores you to your rightful place in the minds and hearts of all lovers of the English language. May your words continue to entertain generations to come. May your wonderful characters, Hamlet and Othello included, continue to move amongst us and keep us thinking, reflecting, and reacting on this great mystery of life. I'm happy to declare that Mr. William Shakespeare is not guilty and is honorably acquitted. Please go back to your bones, to your grave, turn or don't, lie in peace. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, the idea of having a mock trial of this kind is actually Shirish Sahasrabuddhe's idea. And if you like the performance of the presentation, the credit is his. I said yes when he suggested that we should have this kind of a discussion, interface, interaction. But then I found that the idea was too arrogant and too audacious. I could not become Shakespeare. Shirish also wanted me to have costumes and look like Shakespeare. I rather stubbornly refused that also, basically because I am much better looking than Shakespeare. The point was not looking like Shakespeare, but thinking like Shakespeare. So this was a very modest attempt at understanding a very creative mind, of which very little is known and therefore conjectures gather. But like Shakespeare says at the end of Midsummer Night's Dream, he says, if we shadows have offended, think but this and all is mended. It is to say, if you did not like our program, just think this way and everything will be fine. And that you but slumbered here while these visions did appear. That you came to this hall, nice air-conditioned hall, you found a good seat, went to sleep. And this was like having a sequence of dream, a dream sequence while you were asleep. And if this weak and idle thief, we are not perfect and we are not nowhere close to Shakespeare, but if this weak and idle thief yielded nothing, no more yielding than a dream. You see, people who have got digestion problems always have dreams. So if it's a good dream, we cherish it, we remember it. If it's a bad dream, we say, oh, it was only a dream. We forget. Gentles do not reprehend. Shakespeare says to his playgoers, the word audience, spectators didn't exist in Shakespeare's times. He says to the playgoers that the entire world of theatre survives on your tolerance. Gentles, do not reprehend. Don't hate us for our mistakes. If you pardon, we shall mend. So while I thank symbiosis, Dr. Muzumdar was my favorite teacher. Though I left science later on, he taught me botany. I thank Shirish. I thank all my accusers. I thank Madam Chief Justice. And I thank all of you. Give us a second chance. If you did not like it, give it a second chance. We'll do it better next time.